Two of the Morrison government's most senior ministers have pushed back against calls to fast-track humanitarian visas for hundreds of Afghan workers who helped Australian soldiers. In a piece in today's Daily Telegraph, Peter Dutton and Marise Payne say Australia's strict vetting procedures for visa applicants are not up for negotiation. And while they overwhelmingly support helping Afghans who serve side by side with ADF personnel, the ministers say they won't put Australians at risk by issuing a blanket approval for every application. Defence Minister Peter Dutton joins me now from Brisbane. Minister, thank you for your time. You don't need to convince me, but explain to my viewers why, even with the Taliban starting to move into territory once held by coalition forces, why it's so important to run through a comprehensive and thorough process on these Afghan applicants.
Well, firstly, Peter, thanks for having me on the show. Nice to be here without the bells ringing, actually, in Canberra. So, look, a couple of important points. One is that we know that even if somebody in 2012 was helping the Australian Defence Force, and maybe there's a digger at the moment that has a case where they're trying to help somebody come across who had helped us in Afghanistan, and they want them now to settle in Australia, the circumstances could have changed quite dramatically with that individual. So we know that in some cases, for their own survival, for understandable reasons, people have switched allegiances where they might have once supported us. They're now supporting the Taliban, or there's a question about their allegiance. We obviously do a lot of work with the United States and our other partners looking at the individual security advice or package around each individual. That's the first point. The second point is that they may come from a family unit where we don't know anything about the teenage sons, and we've made a deliberate strategy in recent years in taking people from Syria and elsewhere in the Middle East, where we aren't taking people that have children or adult children of 18 or 19, 21 years of age, of fighting age, when we don't know anything about them. And the last thing any of us want to do is, in an effort to try and support those that have helped us, bring the wrong people here who would ultimately seek to do harm to Australians. We don't want a terrorist attack here. We don't want people coming here that don't share our values, and we have to get the balance right. We're absolutely committed to taking care of people who have helped our diggers and in many cases saved their lives, but we aren't going to bring people here, as Marise and I pointed out today, on a blanket approval arrangement when we don't know enough about that individual.
Have there been instances of Afghans with links to the Taliban applying for visas?
Well, some of the people that we've looked at, significant numbers, we do have security concerns about, and there will be links to organisations including the Taliban. That's the reality of Afghanistan and the Middle East. It's an evolving situation in the Middle East, and somebody that we had a very good relationship with 5 or 6 or 9, 10 years ago might be in a very different position today. There might be some people, as we pointed out today, that don't qualify under the arrangement that we've got in place for the locally employed that we have the relationship with, that could apply under the humanitarian program. But again, there is just no compromise on the security vetting that we have in place.
All right, talk to me, if you can, then about this Chinese spy ship that's arrived off the coast of Queensland as Australian troops are preparing for the exercises with the US later this week. Talisman Sabre, those exercises. The General Intelligence vessel, I'm told, is outside Australian territorial waters, but inside our exclusive economic zone. It's expected to stay there for some time. Talisman Sabre ends in mid-August. Are they watching us, or are we watching them, or a bit of both?
Well, there's no doubt that they're here for a purpose, and their purpose is to gather intelligence on Australia and our partners, our allies. We've got this incredible training exercise underway, which we launched today at Amberley Air Base in Brisbane. 17,000 troops, including 8,000 ADF personnel. So they've come from not just the United States, but the UK, New Zealand. We've got a lot of support from Japan, the Republic of Korea, and many others that are observing. It's a very important exercise for us. We do want to deepen our relations with the United States. We want them to have a greater presence in our region. We think the Indo-Pacific increasingly is becoming not insecure, but a different security proposition than it posed even a few years ago. So they will be collecting intelligence on those exercises. We've seen it in the past. No doubt the Communist Party will deny that, but that's the reality of their presence, and we want them to operate within the international laws, and we would expect them to do that. That's what they've done in the past, and we anticipate that's what they'll do on this occasion.
Right. Minister, you're a former Home Affairs Minister, but I like you because you're plain speaking. How on earth does Quade Cooper play 70 tests for the Wallabies and get knocked back for Australian citizenship?
Well, there are always complex questions into these matters, Peter, that don't always play out on the front pages of the paper. I mean, Quade Cooper's a great footy player, and you'd want to see him as an Australian citizen if that's possible. There is a legislative requirement, though, that people spend a certain amount of time in Australia. There's also questions about people's backgrounds. I don't know anything about Quade's background. I'm sure he's of good character, but all of that will be investigated by the Department of Home Affairs. But regardless of who it is, whether you're ordinary Australian, you're an ordinary person, a billionaire, a sports celebrity, there is the same law that applies to everybody. And that law requires people to spend a certain amount of time in Australia in the years preceding their application for an Australian citizenship. That may apply in this case. I don't have the detail of his application, but all of that would be investigated.
Yeah, but if he's overseas playing for Australia, if that's the reason he's out of the country because he's representing Australia, does that get taken into consideration?
Well, there's the ability for, there's a special category, as I recall, within the Citizenship Act to look at somebody with that, with that sporting career. But it is the case. I remember looking at a matter a couple of years ago where there was a prominent Australian or a prominent permanent citizen who had, done incredible investments into, or made incredible investments into Australia, employed people here, but because they lived between here and another country, they weren't eligible. And the sort of person that you'd want to be an Australian citizen here because, they were investing money, they were employing Australians, and they're all the things that are taken into consideration. But no doubt Karen Andrews, as the Home Affairs Minister, will have a look at that and see what outcome they can achieve.
Yeah, look, it's not fair to ask you because you're no longer the Minister, but I know it's top of mind for a lot of people today. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And we're talking about Afghans and many other people, but we've got a bloke who's wearing the uniform, can't get a Guernsey as an Australian citizen. Peter Dutton, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Peter.